In the massive Star Wars galaxy, few figures embody the tragic fall from honor to horror quite like General Grievous. Before he became the feared cyborg commander who haunted the nightmares of Jedi Knights, before his metallic claws clutched stolen lightsabers and his mechanical laugh echoed through burning warships, he was Kaimayan Jai Shilal, a proud warrior fighting for the survival of his people. The transformation of a tribal warlord into the galaxy's most notorious Jedi hunter is a tale that spans decades, crossing paths with the machinations of Sith lords, the arrogance of the Republic, and the fate of entire civilizations. It's a story of betrayal, ambition, and the price of power, where the lines between victim and villain blur in the shadows of a galaxy at war. From the savage battlefields of Kali to the gleaming halls of separatist warships, we'll trace the blood-soaked path of a warrior who sacrificed not just his body, but his very soul in pursuit of vengeance. We'll witness how the Republic's intervention in a local conflict sparked a chain of events that would help topple the Jedi Order itself. Through battlefield footage, classified intelligence reports, and testimonies from those who faced him in combat, we'll piece together the true story of the being who became more machine than man. But this is more than just the biography of a warlord. It's an examination of how the galaxy's power players, the Republic, the Jedi, and the hidden Sith used and manipulated beings for their own ends. General Grievous wasn't born a monster. He was crafted into one through a combination of personal choices and careful manipulation by forces beyond his control. In the next 2 hours, we'll explore the warrior culture that forged him, the devastating war that shaped him, and the cybernetic transformation that rebuilt him. We'll analyze his legendary combat techniques, witness his most infamous battles, and understand how a single being could inspire terror across thousands of worlds. From his ruthless command of the separatist droid armies to his personal collection of Jedi lightsabers, each taken from a fallen knight, we'll see how Grievous became the face of fear in the Clone Wars. And perhaps most importantly, we'll uncover the truth behind his final days, the growing paranoia, the betrayal by his Sith masters, and the climactic battle on Utapau that would end his reign of terror. Through it all, one question remains. Was General Grievous truly the architect of his own destiny? Or was he simply another pawn in the grand game that would transform the Republic into the first galactic empire? This is the story of General Grievous, warrior, warlord, and harbinger of the fall of the Jedi Order. His tale serves as a dark reminder that in times of war, the greatest monsters aren't born, they're made. The story of General Grievous begins on Kali, a harsh crimson world of steep cliffs and dense jungles sitting on the borders of wild space. Located in the tumultuous Outer Rim, this isolated planet forged one of the most formidable warrior cultures the galaxy has ever known, the Kaleesh. The Kaleesh evolved as apex predators, their natural hunting prowess enhanced by a sophisticated warrior culture that would eventually produce one of the galaxy's most feared military commanders. Their distinctive red-skinned appearance and tradition of wearing masks carved from the bones of their world's most dangerous creatures created an image that struck fear into their enemies long before Grievous would don his now infamous cybernetic mask. It was into this martial society that Kaimayan Jai Shilal, the future General Grievous, was born. The Kaleesh lived in tribal groups, each led by a powerful warlord or Khajidik, and young Shilal's tribe was among the most respected. From his earliest years, he was immersed in the complex spiritual and military traditions that defined Kaleesh culture. Their religion, centered around the worship of their ancestors as gods, taught that the greatest warriors would themselves become divine upon death, a belief that would later fuel Grievous's desperate quest for immortality. The Kaleesh warriors trained from childhood in their society's ancient combat arts. Their traditional weapons, rifles, spears, and vibro swords, were considered sacred implements passed down through generations and believed to carry the spirits of past warriors. Young Shilal showed exceptional prowess with these weapons, but it was his tactical mind that truly set him apart. Even as a child, he could read the landscape like a military map, understanding instinctively how to use Kalee's treacherous terrain to his advantage. Kalee's warrior culture was not merely about combat, it was a complete philosophical system. Honor was paramount, and victory without honor was considered worse than defeat. Warriors were expected to be more than fighters. They were guardians of their people's history and traditions. The elaborate masks worn by Kaleesh warriors weren't just for intimidation. They were symbols of their connection to their ancestors and the great beasts they had hunted. Each mask was unique, telling the story of its wearer's achievements and lineage. The harsh environment of Kalee itself played a crucial role in shaping its people. The planet's ecosystem was unforgiving, populated by numerous dangerous predatory species that forced the Kaleesh to become fierce warriors simply to survive. The Mumu, giant semi-sentient reptilians, were particularly feared. Young warriors were often required to hunt these creatures as part of their coming-of-age trials. Shilal's legendary successful hunt of a Mumu at an unusually young age marked him early as someone extraordinary. The Kaleesh social structure was built around the concept of strength serving the community. Warriors were expected to protect and provide for their people, and leadership was earned through demonstrated ability rather than inherited privilege. This meritocratic system allowed Shilal to rise quickly through the ranks despite his relatively humble origins. His early life was marked by countless small-scale conflicts with rival tribes and dangerous hunting expeditions, each serving to hone his skills and build his reputation. Education in Kaleesh society focused heavily on military history and strategy. Young warriors studied the campaigns of their ancestors, learning to apply ancient wisdom to modern conflicts. The Kaleesh had developed sophisticated battle tactics over generations, incorporating their intimate knowledge of Kalee's terrain with their superior hunting skills. These lessons would later influence Grievous's innovative military strategies during the Clone Wars. The economy of Kalee was primarily subsistence-based, with warriors serving as both protectors and providers. This dual role created a profound sense of responsibility that shaped Shilal's early worldview. The concept of fighting for survival, not just personal survival, but the survival of one's entire people, was deeply ingrained in Kaleesh culture. This mindset would later make Shilal particularly vulnerable to manipulation when his people faced their greatest crisis. Religious ceremonies played a vital role in Kaleesh warrior culture. Before major battles or hunts, warriors would perform elaborate rituals, painting their masks with symbols of power and reciting ancient prayers to their ancestors. These ceremonies served both spiritual and practical purposes, building unit cohesion and mental preparation for combat. The future General Grievous was known for his strict adherence to these traditions, earning him respect among the more traditionally minded Kaleesh. This rich cultural tapestry would form the foundation of Grievous's character, both his strengths and his fatal flaws. The warrior code that emphasized honor and protection of one's people would eventually twist into an obsession with victory at any cost. The religious reverence for ancestors would transform into a burning desire for personal glory. And the skills honed in Kayleigh's harsh landscape would one day make him one of the most effective killers the galaxy had ever seen. The warrior culture of Kali didn't just produce a military commander. It created a complex figure whose actions would help shape the fate of the galaxy. To understand General Grievous, one must first understand the world that forged him, where every child was raised to be a warrior, and every warrior was raised to be a legend. The conflict that would transform Kimayan Jai Shilal from a respected tribal warrior into the legendary figure who would eventually become General Grievous began with an invasion. The Yamari, known more commonly as the Hook, were an insectoid species whose expansionist ambitions brought them to the borders of Kalish territory. What started as minor border skirmishes quickly escalated into one of the bloodiest conflicts the Outer Rim had ever witnessed. The Huk were technologically superior to the Kalish, possessing modern weapons and starships, while the Kalish relied primarily on slug throwers and primitive artillery. However, what the Kalish lacked in technology, they made up for in tactical brilliance and ferocious determination. It was during these early battles that Shilal first demonstrated his extraordinary military genius. In what would become one of his most notable early victories, Shilal led a force of Kalish warriors against a significantly larger Hook army. Understanding that direct confrontation would be suicide, he utilized the treacherous terrain of Kali to his advantage. Shilal positioned his forces in strategic positions, using the landscape to create the illusion of a much larger army. The Hook forces, their rigid insectoid bodies ill-suited to the terrain, were systematically destroyed in what became a textbook example of guerrilla warfare. This victory earned Shilal his first major command, but it was his subsequent campaign that truly cemented his reputation. The Hook had established a series of fortified colonies along Kali's equatorial regions, using them as staging grounds for deeper incursions into Kalish territory. Rather than attacking these strongholds directly, Shilal orchestrated a brilliant deception. He allowed the Hook to intercept false intelligence suggesting a massive Kalish assault on their northern holdings, causing them to redirect their forces. With the colonies weakened, Shilal's warriors struck with devastating efficiency, liberating dozens of Kalish settlements and capturing crucial Huk technology. As the war intensified, Shilal's tactical innovations became increasingly sophisticated. He adapted captured Huk technology to Kalish fighting styles, creating hybrid weapons that combine the raw power of modern armaments with the precision of traditional Kalish combat techniques. His warriors learned to disable Huk battle droids with electromagnetic pulses generated from modified Kalish spears, and he developed new battle formations that maximized the effectiveness of both primitive and modern weapons. The turning point of the war came during a prolonged siege against the Huk's primary planetary headquarters. For months, Shilal laid siege to the facility, using a combination of psychological warfare and carefully planned attacks to wear down the Huk defenders. When the final assault came, it demonstrated Shilal's tactical brilliance. He had spent the siege period training elite teams of warriors in the use of captured Huk equipment. These teams bypassed the main defenses entirely, striking at the heart of the Hook Command structure. The subsequent battle ended with the complete destruction of the Hook Command structure on Kali. This victory marked a shift in the war's momentum. Shilal, now recognized as the supreme military leader of the Kaleesh, began a systematic campaign to drive the Hook not just from Kali, but from all their colony worlds in the sector. It was this expansion of the conflict that would eventually draw the attention and the ire of the Galactic Republic. The Republic initially viewed the conflict as a local matter, but the Huck's diplomatic corps launched a sophisticated propaganda campaign, portraying themselves as victims of Kaleesh aggression. They conveniently omitted their initial invasion and their attempts to enslave the Kaleesh people, instead focusing on Shilal's brutal tactics and the growing list of Hook worlds that had fallen to his forces. Several controversial engagements during the latter stages of the war provided the Hook with the diplomatic ammunition they needed. While Shilal maintained that his targets were legitimate military objectives disguised as civilian installations, the incidents provided the leverage the Hook needed. The Republic Senate, swayed by Hook diplomats and concerned about the stability of the sector, finally intervened. The Republic's intervention took the form of economic sanctions against Kali and military support for the Hook. Shilal, who had sacrificed everything to protect his people, watched helplessly as the sanctions devastated Kali's already fragile economy. The warrior who had never lost a major battle was defeated not by force of arms, but by political maneuvering and economic warfare. This bitter defeat planted the seeds of hatred that would later define General Grievous. The Republic's apparent hypocrisy, punishing the Kaleesh for defending themselves while supporting the very species that had attempted to enslave them, created a deep-seated resentment toward both the Republic and the Jedi Order that had enforced the sanctions. The war's end left Shilal a changed man. Though celebrated as a hero by his people, he had seen firsthand how the galaxy's power structures could render even the most brilliant military victories meaningless. His transformation from Kimayan Jai Shilal to General Grievous would begin here, in the bitter aftermath of a war that he had won on the battlefield but lost in the Senate chambers of Coruscant. The transformation of Kimayan Jai Shilal into General Grievous stands as one of the most calculated acts of manipulation in galactic history. In the aftermath of the Huck War, with crushing sanctions destroying Kali's economy, Shilal found himself approached by the intergalactic banking clan. The banking clan, secretly operating under the direction of Count Dooku and Darth Sidious, offered him a deal that seemed too good to refuse. In exchange for his service as an enforcer and collections agent, they would assume Kali's massive debt and provide aid to his struggling people. Shilal, desperate to save his world from economic collapse, accepted the position. His initial work for the banking clan revealed his exceptional talent for intimidation and military planning on a galactic scale. However, this wasn't enough for the Sith's grand design. They needed something more, a creature of pure terror who could lead their droid armies and strike fear into the hearts of Jedi. Shilal's transformation from proud warrior to cybernetic monster was about to begin. The pivotal moment came aboard his shuttle during what should have been a routine transport mission. What few knew at the time was that Count Dooku had arranged for the shuttle's destruction, carefully orchestrating every detail of the crash. The banking clan security forces had secretly sabotaged the vessel, ensuring its systems would fail at a crucial moment. When the sabotage took effect, the shuttle plummeted from orbit, breaking apart in Kayleigh's atmosphere. The crash itself was a masterwork of precision destruction. It was designed not to kill Shilal outright, but to grievously wound him, leaving him in a state where only the most extreme medical intervention could save his life. The injuries were catastrophic: massive internal trauma, severe burns over most of his body, and damage to virtually every major organ system. Yet somehow, perhaps through sheer force of will, or perhaps as part of the Sith's careful calculations, Shilal survived. Sanhil, chairman of the banking clan, presented the broken warrior with another devil's bargain. They could save his life through cybernetic reconstruction, but only if he agreed to serve as the supreme commander of the separatist droid army. The operation would be expensive, they explained, and this would be his way of repaying their generosity. In his pain and desperation, Shilal agreed, though he would later claim he had never consented to the full extent of the cybernetic conversion that followed. The reconstruction took place in a secret facility on Geonosis, overseen by separatist scientists and medical experts. The process was excruciating, transforming him into something far more mechanical than organic. They preserved his brain, eyes, vital organs, and some spinal cord tissue, but virtually everything else was replaced with cutting-edge cybernetics. The new body they crafted was a masterpiece of biomechanical engineering. Standing over 7 feet tall, the duranium alloy frame was designed to support multiple fighting styles while providing exceptional durability. The arms could split into 4 separate limbs, each capable of wielding a lightsaber with deadly precision. His mechanical body was engineered for exceptional mobility and balance, allowing him to move with lethal precision even in zero gravity. His internal organs were protected by armor plating that could withstand direct blaster fire. But perhaps the most crucial element of the transformation was psychological. During the reconstruction process, the separatist scientists enhanced his capacity for aggression while ensuring he would remain loyal to their cause. The modifications preserved his tactical genius while reshaping his personality to better serve their needs. The signature cough that would become one of his most recognizable features was a result of his remaining organic lungs, struggling to adapt to their new cybernetic housing. The final touch was the mask. Designed to echo the bone masks worn by Kaleesh warriors, it became both a symbol of his heritage and a terrifying visage that would strike fear into his enemies. The eyes were engineered to enhance his already formidable hunting abilities, capable of seeing in multiple light spectrums and zooming in on distant targets. When Grievous first awakened in his new form, his reaction was one of horror and rage. The extent of his cybernetic conversion far exceeded what he had believed he was agreeing to. However, the Separatists had anticipated this reaction. They presented him with evidence fabricated by Count Dooku that the Jedi had been behind the shuttle crash, playing into his existing resentment toward the Republic and its guardians. Count Dooku took personal charge of Grievous's rehabilitation and training, teaching him the art of lightsaber combat. The Count recognized that Grievous's new body, combined with his natural hunting instincts and tactical mind, could make him one of the deadliest duelists in the galaxy. He provided Grievous with his first lightsaber taken from a Jedi Master Dooku had killed, and encouraged him to begin building his own collection of such trophies. The final stage of Grievous's transformation was his integration into the Separatist power structure. he was officially presented as the Supreme Commander of the Droid armies, a title that appealed to his military pride while disguising his true role as a pawn in the Sith's larger game. The banking clan publicly claimed that Grievous had voluntarily undergone his cybernetic transformation to better serve their cause, creating a narrative that helped cement his fearsome reputation while hiding the tragic reality of his conversion. This new identity, General Grievous, was both a transformation and a perversion of everything Kimayan Jai Shilal had been. The proud warrior's sense of honor had been twisted into a thirst for revenge. His tactical brilliance remained, but was now directed towards spreading terror rather than protecting his people. And his body, once a testament to Kalish's physical prowess, had become a mechanical mockery of his former self. The being that emerged from this transformation would become one of the most feared figures in the Clone Wars, a nightmare that would haunt the Jedi Order until its final days. Yet beneath the duranium armor and cybernetic enhancements, somewhere in what remained of his organic brain, the memories of Kimayan Jai Shilal, the proud Kalish warrior who had only wanted to protect his people, endured, fueling a rage that would help bring the galaxy to its knees. In the shadowy halls of separatist strongholds, Count Dooku undertook the meticulous process of transforming General Grievous from a skilled warrior into something the galaxy had never seen before. A cybernetic nightmare capable of challenging the greatest Jedi Masters. This training period would fundamentally reshape not just Grievous's combat abilities, but his entire worldview. Dooku began with the foundations of lightsaber combat, teaching Grievous the classical forms that had been the backbone of Jedi training for millennia. The Count, himself a master of Form 2 Makashi, recognized that Grievous's cybernetic enhancements offered unprecedented opportunities to expand upon traditional fighting styles. The general's ability to split his arms into 4 separate limbs, combined with his enhanced processing speed and hydraulic strength, meant he could execute movements that would be impossible for any organic being. The training was brutal and relentless. Dooku would spend hours drilling Grievous in the basic positions of each lightsaber form, ensuring that every movement was precise and lethal. The Count's teaching style was ruthless, often involving painful corrections when Grievous failed to meet his exacting standards. This harsh approach resonated with Grievous's own warrior background, where excellence was demanded and failure carried severe consequences. Grievous proved to be an exceptionally quick study, his tactical mind rapidly absorbing the intricacies of lightsaber combat. He began to develop his own unique fighting style, blending elements from multiple traditional forms with his native Kalish combat techniques. His signature style would incorporate aspects of several classical lightsaber forms: the aggressive strikes of Form 5 Deviemso, the acrobatic maneuvers of Form 4 Ataru, the defensive precision of Form 3 Soresu, and the dueling finesse of Form 2 Makashi. Throughout this physical training, Dooku also worked to deepen Grievous's hatred for the Jedi Order. He would share carefully selected stories of Jedi hypocrisy, tales of their involvement in conflicts across the galaxy where they had chosen political expediency over justice. The Count particularly emphasized the Jedi's role in enforcing the Republic's sanctions against Kaylee, presenting it as evidence of their fundamental corruption. These philosophical discussions often took place during combat training, with Dooku using physical exertion to reinforce his psychological manipulation. The cybernetic nature of Grievous's new body required entirely new approaches to combat training. His mechanical limbs could move at speeds that would tear organic tissue apart, and his computerized targeting systems allowed for unprecedented precision. Dooku taught him to exploit these advantages, developing techniques that would be impossible for Jedi to predict or counter effectively. The general learned to spin his torso rapidly while wielding multiple lightsabers, creating an impenetrable wall of plasma that could both defend against attacks and strike from unexpected angles. Grievous's training also focused heavily on psychological warfare. Dooku taught him to use fear as a weapon, understanding that a frightened Jedi was more likely to make mistakes. The general learned to incorporate intimidating movements and his signature threatening laugh into his combat style, designed to unsettle opponents before the first blow was struck. His ability to skitter across floors and walls like an arachnid, combined with his imposing height and the terrifying sound of his mechanical movement, became as much a part of his combat effectiveness as his lightsaber skills. The Count also instructed Grievous in the art of lightsaber collection, teaching him to view each captured weapon as both a trophy and a tool for psychological domination. Each lightsaber taken from a fallen Jedi would serve as proof of his lethal capabilities and a reminder to future opponents of their potential fate. This practice appealed to both Grievous's warrior heritage, where collecting trophies from worthy opponents was honored, and his growing hatred of the Jedi Order. Perhaps the most significant aspect of Grievous's training was learning to compensate for his few remaining organic components. While his cybernetic body provided numerous advantages, his organic brain still needed to process all this new information and capability. His advanced cybernetic systems allowed him to predict and counter Jedi movements with remarkable precision. Though not Force-sensitive himself, Grievous learned to analyze and predict how Jedi would use the Force in combat, developing counters for common Force techniques through careful study and observation. The training regimen also included extensive study of Jedi battle tactics and traditional temple training methods. This knowledge allowed Grievous to anticipate how Jedi would react in combat situations, giving him a crucial advantage in duels. He learned to recognize the different lightsaber forms by sight and developed specific counters for each, often using his superior speed and extra limbs to overwhelm traditional defenses. Dooku's influence extended beyond mere combat training. He carefully cultivated Grievous's growing megalomania, encouraging his pride while simultaneously keeping him subordinate to separatist authority. The Count would often praise Grievous's growing abilities while reminding him of his debt to the separatist cause, creating a complex web of loyalty, obligation, and controlled ambition. As Grievous's training progressed, he began to develop his own innovations in combat. His signature move of rapidly spinning his wrists to create an overwhelming offense was entirely his own invention, as was his technique of using his mechanical feet as additional weapons in close combat. He learned to incorporate his ability to suddenly split his arms into devastating surprise attacks, often waiting until a crucial moment in a duel to reveal this capability. These months of intensive training under Count Dooku transformed Grievous from a formidable warrior into something unprecedented in galactic history, a being capable of simultaneously wielding 4 lightsabers with deadly precision, who could match and exceed the physical capabilities of Force users through pure mechanical advantage. The result was a supreme commander who could not only lead armies, but strike terror into the hearts of the Republic's most powerful defenders. The warrior who emerged from this training would soon prove himself capable of killing Jedi Masters in single combat, earning a fearsome reputation that would make even the most experienced knights hesitate to face him alone. The combat style developed by General Grievous stands as one of the most unique and terrifying forms of warfare ever witnessed in the galaxy. His ability to wield multiple lightsabers simultaneously transformed him from a mere military commander into a legend that haunted the nightmares of even the most seasoned Jedi Knights. At the core of his fighting method was an unprecedented fusion of mechanical precision, predatory instinct, and psychological warfare. Grievous's signature combat stance began with his ability to split his arms into 4 separate limbs, each capable of operating independently while maintaining perfect synchronization. His mechanical wrists could rotate 360 degrees at incredible speeds, creating a devastating blur of plasma that few opponents could penetrate. This whirlwind of lightsabers served both offensive and defensive purposes, allowing him to attack from multiple angles while maintaining a nearly impenetrable defense. The General's lightsaber collection was far more than mere trophy-taking. Each weapon was carefully selected and maintained, often chosen for specific tactical advantages. He preferred lightsabers taken from skilled duelists, believing these weapons carried an inherent quality that mass-produced blades lacked. His collection included weapons from many fallen Jedi Masters, each serving as both a practical tool and a psychological weapon against their former comrades. Grievous would often begin duels by revealing his trophy collection, allowing his opponents to recognize the weapons of fallen comrades, a psychological tactic that proved devastatingly effective. His cybernetic body allowed for combat maneuvers that would be impossible for any organic being. The electromagnets in his clawed feet enabled him to maintain perfect balance while executing complex attacking patterns, and his ability to reverse joint movement meant he could strike from angles that defied conventional defense. Grievous could transition from bipedal combat to a 4-limbed stalking position in an instant, skittering across walls and ceilings with predatory grace that paralyzed opponents with primal fear. One of Grievous's most effective techniques was his adaptive combat programming. His computerized targeting systems could analyze an opponent's fighting style within seconds, identifying patterns and weaknesses that could be exploited. This capability, combined with his extensive training under Count Dooku, allowed him to recognize and counter all 7 forms of traditional lightsaber combat. When facing multiple opponents, he could engage each one with a different lightsaber form simultaneously, creating chaos and confusion among coordinated Jedi attacks. The General's approach to combat incorporated extensive psychological warfare. His mechanical body was designed to be intimidating, from the skull-like mask that paid homage to his Kaleesh warrior heritage to the sound of his mechanical movements, which created an unnerving clicking and whirring that echoed through battlefield corridors. His infamous cough, rather than being a weakness, became another tool of intimidation, a reminder that something organic and hateful lurked within the mechanical frame. Grievous developed specific strategies for different types of opponents. Against single Jedi, he would often begin with a conservative approach, using only 2 lightsabers while keeping his ability to split his arms in reserve. This allowed him to lull opponents into a false sense of security before suddenly doubling his offensive capability at a crucial moment. Against multiple opponents, he would immediately deploy all 4 arms, using his rotating wrist technique to create a defensive sphere of plasma while looking for opportunities to isolate and eliminate individual targets. His hunting instincts, honed during his years as a Kaleesh warrior, remained intact despite his cybernetic transformation. Grievous would often stalk his prey before engaging, using the psychological impact of pursuit to wear down their resolve. He understood that fear could be as effective a weapon as any lightsaber, and he excelled at creating an atmosphere of terror before combat even began. His mechanical body could move in complete silence when needed, allowing him to appear suddenly from unexpected angles. The integration of his cybernetic enhancements with traditional combat techniques was perhaps his greatest innovation. His mechanical legs could compress and release with explosive force, launching him into aerial attacks that could cover enormous distances in seconds. His armor plating was specifically designed to deflect both lightsaber strikes and force-based attacks, and the sophisticated sensors in his mask could track opponents even through solid obstacles. One of Grievous's most devastating techniques was his ability to alter his combat rhythm unpredictably. He could switch from lightning-fast strikes to deliberately slow movements, from defensive rotations to aggressive lunges, all while maintaining perfect balance and control. This made it nearly impossible for opponents to establish any sort of rhythm in their own defense, as they could never predict which version of Grievous they would face from one moment to the next. The General also developed counters for common force techniques. While he couldn't use the Force himself, his mechanical body and combat programming allowed him to predict and respond to Force-based attacks. He learned to recognize the subtle signs that preceded different Force techniques and developed specific counters for each. Against Force pushes, he would anchor himself using his magnetized feet. Against Force-enhanced jumps, he would use his rotating lightsabers to create an impossible-to-dodge wall of plasma. Grievous's lightsaber collection grew with each victory, and he would often modify his fighting style based on the specific weapons he carried. Some lightsabers were better suited for certain techniques than others, and he became expert at selecting the perfect combination for each encounter. He would sometimes deliberately use lightsabers taken from fallen Jedi against their former companions, adding another layer of psychological warfare to his arsenal. The combination of mechanical precision, adaptive programming, and psychological manipulation made Grievous one of the deadliest duelists in the galaxy. His unique fighting style was not merely about winning battles. It was designed to spread terror through the Jedi Order and demoralize the Republic's forces. Each victory added to his fearsome reputation, and each fallen Jedi whose lightsaber joined his collection served as a warning to others who might dare to face him in combat. As Supreme Commander of the Droid armies, General Grievous revolutionized warfare on a galactic scale. His approach to military command combined the relentless efficiency of his mechanical body with the cunning tactical mind that had made him legendary during the Huck War. Under his leadership, the Separatist army evolved from a mere collection of battle droids into one of the most formidable military forces the galaxy had ever seen. Grievous's command style was characterized by an unusual blend of micromanagement and strategic delegation. He maintained direct control over critical operations while implementing a sophisticated command structure that allowed for rapid response to changing battlefield conditions. Unlike many commanders who viewed battle droids as disposable assets, Grievous understood that even mechanical soldiers could be used more effectively with proper tactical deployment. One of his most significant innovations was the development of specialized droid units designed for specific combat roles. He reorganized the standard B-1 battle droids into task-specific squadrons, creating dedicated infiltration teams, heavy weapons units, and close combat specialists. The more advanced B-2 super battle droids were deployed in breakthrough formations designed to exploit weaknesses in Republic lines. This specialization allowed for more complex battle strategies than the simple overwhelming force tactics previously employed by Separatist commanders. The Battle of Boz Pitti demonstrated his tactical brilliance in coordinating diverse droid forces. Rather than launching a direct assault on the heavily fortified Republic positions, Grievous implemented a multi-layered strategy that became a template for future operations. He deployed specialized infiltration units to disable key defense systems, while his main force engaged Republic troops in diversionary actions. His personally led elite units struck at critical command and control centers, nearly capturing several high-ranking Republic officers and Jedi. Grievous's understanding of psychological warfare extended beyond personal combat to full-scale military operations. He would often deliberately leave survivors of his attacks to spread terror through Republic forces, and his habit of collecting the lightsabers of fallen Jedi served as a powerful propaganda tool. The mere rumor of his presence on a battlefield could cause Republic forces to hesitate, giving his armies crucial tactical advantages. His command center aboard the Invisible Hand showcased his approach to military leadership. The ship was modified to his exact specifications, featuring advanced tactical displays and real-time battlefield monitoring systems. Grievous could simultaneously coordinate multiple planetary invasions from this mobile headquarters, using his cybernetically enhanced processing speed to analyze and respond to battlefield developments faster than any organic commander. The Battle of Duro demonstrated his ability to coordinate complex, multi-pronged attacks. Grievous synchronized the actions of 3 separate battle groups, timing their attacks to overwhelm the planet's layered defenses. While Republic forces scrambled to respond to threats in the outer system, his main force struck directly at the orbital cities. The capture of this strategic shipbuilding world sent shockwaves through the Republic and demonstrated that even heavily defended core worlds were not safe from Separatist attack. One of Grievous's most effective strategies was his use of infiltration warfare. He frequently deployed commando droids for precision strikes against critical infrastructure, using their advanced capabilities to neutralize key defensive positions before main assault forces arrived. The tactic proved particularly effective during the conquest of Banvar Station, where a small team of commandos disabled the facility's shield generators, allowing Grievous's forces to capture the strategic installation with minimal losses. The general's approach to planetary invasion was equally innovative. Rather than relying solely on overwhelming force, he developed a system of targeted strikes designed to paralyze planetary defense networks. His droids would simultaneously attack power grids, communication centers, and military command posts, leaving defending forces isolated and unable to coordinate their response. This strategy proved particularly effective during the Outer Rim campaigns, where numerous Republic strongholds fell to precisely coordinated attacks. Grievous also revolutionized the use of space combat tactics. He recognized that droid fighters, while individually inferior to Republic starfighters, could be programmed to execute complex maneuvers with perfect precision. He developed new formation attacks that took advantage of this capability, creating fighter screens so dense that even the most skilled Jedi pilots struggled to penetrate them. The Battle of Bothawui showcased these tactics, as his droid fighters executed synchronized attack patterns that overwhelmed Republic squadron formations. Within the Separatist alliance, Grievous's military influence extended far beyond tactical command. He was instrumental in driving the development of new droid models and weapons systems, often providing direct input based on battlefield experience. However, Grievous's command style was not without its critics within the Separatist leadership. His willingness to sacrifice massive numbers of droids to achieve his objectives often drew complaints from the Trade Federation and other commercial interests who viewed the machines as valuable assets rather than military resources. Yet even his critics couldn't argue with his results. Under his command, the Separatist military achieved victories that many had thought impossible. The culmination of Grievous's strategic genius came during the invasion of Coruscant itself. The operation, which required coordinating thousands of ships and millions of droids in an attack on the heavily defended capital of the Republic, demonstrated his ability to manage warfare on an unprecedented scale. The fact that Separatist forces managed to penetrate Coruscant's defenses and temporarily capture the Supreme Chancellor stood as testament to Grievous's capabilities as a military commander, even though the operation itself was ultimately orchestrated by Darth Sidious. Throughout his tenure as Supreme Commander, Grievous maintained a perfect record of personally escaping capture or defeat, even when his forces were overwhelmed. This ability to survive and return to fight another day became a crucial part of the Separatist military strategy, ensuring that their most capable commander remained active throughout the war. His presence alone could turn the tide of a campaign, and the Republic was forced to commit disproportionate resources to any theater where he was suspected to be operating. Throughout the Clone Wars, General Grievous engaged in numerous legendary duels with members of the Jedi Order, each encounter adding to his fearsome reputation and his collection of lightsaber trophies. These confrontations weren't merely tests of combat skill, they were psychological battles that demonstrated Grievous's ability to challenge and defeat some of the most powerful Force users in the galaxy. One of his most infamous encounters occurred on Hippori, where he faced off against several Jedi, including Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shaak-Ti, and Aayla Secura. The battle took place in the wreckage of a crashed Republic assault ship, with Grievous using the shadows and devastation to his advantage. The general's hunting instincts proved lethal as he systematically isolated and attacked each Jedi, demonstrating his ability to fight multiple skilled opponents simultaneously. His rotating wrist technique created an impenetrable defense while allowing him to press his attack, overwhelming even experienced Jedi Masters. The confrontation claimed the lives of several Jedi, with only the intervention of ARC troopers preventing a complete massacre. The surviving Jedi's reports of this battle sent shockwaves through the Order. Here was an enemy who could not only stand against multiple Jedi Masters, but dominate them. The psychological impact of this encounter would resonate throughout the remainder of the war. His encounters with Kit Fisto proved particularly noteworthy. During their clash on Vasek III, Grievous demonstrated his tactical genius even in single combat. After initially losing one of his hands to Fisto's precise blade work, Grievous adapted his strategy, using the moon's narrow corridors to neutralize the Jedi Master's acrobatic fighting style. The duel showcased Grievous's ability to turn apparent disadvantages to his favor, using his damaged components to distract and mislead his opponent. Perhaps his most famous recurring opponent was Obi-Wan Kenobi. Their first major encounter aboard the Malevolence set the tone for their future confrontations. Kenobi's mastery of Sorisu, the defensive third form of lightsaber combat, proved to be an effective counter to Grievous's aggressive style. However, Grievous used these encounters to study Kenobi's technique, adapting and evolving his own strategy with each meeting. Their duels became increasingly complex tactical battles, with both warriors attempting to outmaneuver each other both physically and psychologically. The duel with Mace Windu on Coruscant demonstrated both Grievous's capabilities and limitations. Windu's mastery of Vapad, the seventh form of lightsaber combat, posed a unique challenge. The general found himself unable to predict or counter Windu's aggressive yet controlled assault. This encounter forced Grievous to rely on his tactical mind rather than pure combat skill, leading to a strategic retreat that nonetheless showcased his ability to survive encounters with even the most powerful Jedi. His encounter with Eth Koth demonstrated the evolution of his combat style. The duel, which took place aboard Grievous's command ship, showed how the general had learned to incorporate his cybernetic advantages into traditional lightsaber forms. His ability to split his arms into 4 separate weapons platforms while maintaining perfect coordination proved particularly effective against Koth's aggressive fighting style. Though Koth survived the encounter, the duel added to Grievous's growing reputation as a Jedi hunter. Each of these duels added new dimensions to Grievous's legend. His ability to engage multiple Jedi simultaneously demonstrated that superior numbers weren't enough to guarantee victory against him. His use of psychological warfare, from his intimidating appearance to his trophy collection, created an aura of fear that preceded him into battle. Even when duels ended in stalemate or tactical retreat, Grievous's ability to survive encounters with the most skilled Jedi in the Order enhanced his fearsome reputation. The general's dueling style evolved with each encounter. He learned to recognize and counter the specific techniques of different Jedi Masters, developing an encyclopedic knowledge of their fighting styles. His mechanical memory allowed him to catalog and analyze every move, every strategy, and every weakness he encountered. This accumulated knowledge made him an increasingly dangerous opponent as the war progressed. Grievous's impact on the Jedi Order extended beyond the physical threats he posed. His very existence challenged their traditional understanding of combat and the Force. Here was a being who, without any connection to the Force, could stand against and defeat multiple Jedi Masters through pure skill and mechanical advantage. This reality forced many Jedi to question their assumptions about their own capabilities and limitations. The psychological impact of these duels resonated throughout the Republic. Stories of his encounters spread rapidly, often embellished but terrifying nonetheless. Young Padawans were warned about his tactics, and even experienced knights approached potential encounters with the general with extreme caution. His presence in a battle sector would often require the deployment of multiple Jedi Masters, diverting crucial resources from other fronts. These legendary duels also served the Separatist cause beyond their immediate military impact. Documented encounters between Grievous and Jedi became powerful propaganda tools, demonstrating that the seemingly invincible guardians of the Republic could be challenged and defeated. Each victory added to the growing sense that the Jedi Order was not as invulnerable as many had believed, contributing to the erosion of public confidence in both the Order and the Republic itself. Throughout the Clone Wars, Grievous continued to prove himself a deadly adversary in lightsaber combat, earning his reputation as one of the most feared duelists in the galaxy. His unique combination of cybernetic enhancement, tactical brilliance, and ruthless efficiency made him a nightmare opponent for even the most skilled Jedi Masters, contributing significantly to the eventual downfall of the Jedi Order. General Grievous transcended his role as a military commander to become something far more potent, a living symbol of terror that shook the Republic to its core. The transformation of this once proud Kaleesh warrior into a nightmarish figure of propaganda was no accident, but rather a carefully orchestrated campaign by the Sith to weaponize fear itself. The mere mention of Grievous's name could send shivers through even the most hardened Republic troops. His reputation was built not just on his military victories, but on the theatrical brutality with which he achieved them. The Separatists effectively spread accounts of his encounters with Jedi, carefully emphasizing his most terrifying aspects: the inhuman agility, the merciless efficiency, and the cruel satisfaction he seemed to take in defeating his opponents. Within the Republic, stories of Grievous's brutality spread from world to world, creating an atmosphere of dread wherever Separatist forces were active. Soldiers would share tales of entire platoons encountering the general's distinctive cough echoing through ship corridors, of his ability to appear seemingly from nowhere, and of his ruthless hunting of Jedi. The psychological impact of his existence was so profound that his mere reported presence in a sector could significantly impact Republic military operations. The Sith, particularly Count Dooku, masterfully manipulated Grievous's public image. They understood that fear could be more effective than any military strategy in winning the war. Reports of his victories would spread through Separatist communications networks, while his collection of Jedi lightsabers became a powerful symbol of his lethal capabilities. These accounts often contained elements of truth wrapped in strategic exaggeration, making them all the more terrifying. Among the Separatist forces, Grievous served a dual symbolic purpose. To the organic members of the Confederacy, he represented the perfect fusion of biological determination and technological superiority. His very existence seemed to validate the Separatist cause. Here was a being who had been wronged by the Republic and had literally transformed himself to fight against their corruption. To the countless battle droids under his command, he was a figure of almost religious significance, a hybrid creature who understood both the efficiency of machines and the cunning of organic life. The Sith's propaganda machine worked tirelessly to cultivate different aspects of Grievous's image for different audiences. To core world citizens, he was presented as a mindless monster, a symbol of the chaos that would engulf the galaxy if the Separatists won. In the Outer Rim, however, he was portrayed as a tragic hero, a warrior who had been forced to sacrifice his humanity to fight against Republic oppression. Both narratives served to enhance his effectiveness as a psychological weapon. Grievous himself seemed to understand and embrace his symbolic role. As mentioned before, he would often stage elaborate displays of power, deliberately leaving survivors of his attacks to spread tales of his capabilities. His collection of lightsabers wasn't just about trophies. Each weapon served as a tangible symbol of the Jedi's vulnerability. During military operations, he would sometimes broadcast his intentions to target systems, knowing that the mere sound of his voice could shatter morale before the first shot was fired. The impact of Grievous's symbolic status on the Jedi Order was particularly significant. Young Padawans would fear the cyborg general, while even experienced masters had to confront the uncomfortable reality that one of their greatest threats came from a being with no connection to the Force. This challenged the Order's fundamental beliefs about the superiority of Force-sensitive warriors and contributed to a growing crisis of confidence within their ranks. Separatist propaganda would often juxtapose images of the seemingly serene and detached Jedi with Grievous's raw, emotional combat style. The message was clear. While the Jedi claimed to protect the galaxy, they remained distant from its struggles, while Grievous had sacrificed everything, including his own body, for his cause. This narrative proved particularly effective in Outer Rim worlds, where the Jedi's authority was already viewed with skepticism. The Sith's masterful use of Grievous as a propaganda tool extended to their own allies. Among the Separatist Council, he served as a reminder of both the rewards of loyalty and the consequences of defiance. His presence at council meetings, towering over the wealthy business beings and politicians, was a constant reminder that for all their economic power, true authority in the Confederacy rested on military might. Grievous's appearance itself became iconic. The skull-like mask, the cape that seemed to billow in even the stillest air, the sound of mechanical limbs clicking against metal floors. Every aspect was designed to maximize psychological impact. The banking clan's carefully crafted public narrative about his voluntary transformation helped reinforce his image as a dedicated separatist leader rather than a victimized warrior. Perhaps most importantly, Grievous served as a symbol of the war's transformation of the galaxy itself. His cybernetic body represented the increasing mechanization of conflict, while his tragic background spoke to the personal costs of political struggle. He became a walking embodiment of what the Clone Wars were doing to the galaxy, turning living beings into weapons, sacrificing humanity for power, and blurring the lines between organic and artificial life. The Sith's use of Grievous as a propaganda tool was so effective that it outlived both him and the Clone Wars. Years after his death, his image would continue to haunt the collective memory of the galaxy. He became a cautionary tale, a symbol of terror, and a reminder of how fear could be weaponized as effectively as any battleship or army. In this way, General Grievous achieved a kind of immortality, not through victory in battle, but through his enduring power as a symbol of terror in a galaxy torn apart by war. Behind the fearsome cybernetic exterior and battlefield prowess of General Grievous lay a complex web of psychological flaws and personal demons that would ultimately contribute to his downfall. The transformation from Kiman Jai Shilal to General Grievous wasn't merely physical. It represented a fundamental warping of his character, where the honored warrior traditions of his past became twisted into an obsession with victory at any cost. Grievous's approach to warfare reflected this internal corruption. While he had once fought to protect his people with a strict code of honor, he now employed tactics that would have horrified his former self. He would frequently sacrifice entire battalions of battle droids without hesitation, viewing them as utterly disposable tools rather than resources to be managed carefully. This disregard for his mechanical troops went beyond mere tactical necessity. It seemed to stem from a deep-seated need to prove his superiority over machines, even as he himself became increasingly mechanical. His pursuit of Jedi became an all-consuming obsession that often clouded his tactical judgment. There were numerous instances where Grievous abandoned sound military strategy to pursue a personal vendetta against Jedi opponents. During the Battle of Bothawui, he sacrificed a significant tactical advantage by breaking formation to engage Kit Fisto in single combat, allowing Republic forces to regroup and counterattack. This pattern would repeat itself throughout the war, with his personal hatred of the Jedi frequently undermining his effectiveness as a military commander. Perhaps Grievous's most significant flaw was his overwhelming arrogance. While confidence had been a strength during his days as a Kaleesh warrior, it mutated into a hubris that repeatedly led him to underestimate his opponents. He became so convinced of his own invincibility that he would often ignore obvious tactical warnings from his subordinates, leading to several costly defeats that could have been avoided with more careful consideration. The general's desire for vengeance against the Republic and the Jedi Order consumed him to the point of self-destruction. While this hatred gave him tremendous drive and energy, it also made him predictable to opponents who understood his psychology. Obi-Wan Kenobi, in particular, became adept at exploiting Grievous's tendency to become reckless when his anger was provoked. This vulnerability was all the more tragic because it stemmed from legitimate grievances, the Republic's treatment of his people and the manipulation he had suffered at the hands of the Sith. Despite his cybernetic enhancements, Grievous retained crucial physical vulnerabilities that he refused to acknowledge. His remaining organic components, particularly his internal organs, represented a weakness that could have been better protected had he been willing to admit their existence. Instead, he often exposed himself to unnecessary risk, as if trying to prove that he had transcended his partially organic nature. This denial of his own limitations would prove fatal during his final battle on Utapau. The psychological impact of his transformation was evident in his treatment of his IG-100 Magna Guards. While these advanced droids were specifically designed to complement his combat style, Grievous often treated them with a mixture of dependence and disdain. He relied on them for protection, but would frequently destroy them in fits of rage, as if their very competence was a reminder of his own increasingly mechanical nature. Grievous's relationship with Count Dooku was similarly complicated by his psychological flaws. While he respected Dooku's combat abilities and followed his orders, he harbored a deep resentment about his dependence on the Sith Lord. This internal conflict made him susceptible to manipulation, as he constantly sought to prove his worth while simultaneously chafing under authority. His inability to recognize how this dynamic was being used against him represented a crucial blind spot in his otherwise keen tactical mind. The general's need for recognition and validation manifested in increasingly theatrical displays of power. His collection of lightsabers, while militarily useful, became an obsessive pursuit that went beyond tactical advantage. Each new trophy added to his collection served as a physical representation of his superiority, yet also highlighted his deep-seated insecurities about his transformed state. These psychological flaws were compounded by Grievous's inability to form meaningful connections with others. While he had once been a leader who inspired fierce loyalty among his Kaleesh warriors, he now ruled purely through fear and intimidation. This isolation meant he had no trusted advisors who could help him recognize and compensate for his weaknesses, leaving him increasingly vulnerable to his own worst impulses. His treatment of captured opponents revealed both his sadistic tendencies and his deep-seated need to prove his superiority. Rather than simply eliminating enemies efficiently, he would often engage in elaborate displays of dominance, particularly with Jedi prisoners. These demonstrations, while terrifying, often gave his opponents opportunities to escape or resist that a more pragmatic approach would have prevented. The contrast between Grievous's efficient, calculating military mind and his increasingly erratic personal behavior created a fascinating dichotomy. In battle planning sessions, he could display remarkable clarity and strategic insight, yet in the heat of combat, his personal demons would often override his tactical judgment. This internal conflict made him simultaneously one of the most formidable and vulnerable commanders in the Clone Wars. By the end of his life, Grievous had become a prisoner of his own mythology. The fearsome reputation he had built became a cage, forcing him to constantly prove himself through ever more aggressive and reckless actions. His final confrontation with Obi-Wan Kenobi would serve as the ultimate expression of his character flaws, a battle where his considerable advantages were ultimately undone by his own psychological vulnerabilities and his refusal to acknowledge his limitations. The tragedy of General Grievous lay not just in his physical transformation, but in how his warrior spirit and tactical brilliance became corrupted by anger, fear, and pride. These flaws, exploited by the Sith and exacerbated by his cybernetic transformation, would ultimately prove as fatal as any physical weakness. The bitter irony of General Grievous's position within the Separatist Alliance becomes apparent when we examine his relationship with the Sith Lords who commanded him. Despite his fearsome reputation and the seemingly vast authority he wielded as Supreme Commander of the Droid armies, Grievous was caught in an intricate web of manipulation that would ultimately lead to his downfall. During the height of the Clone Wars, Grievous's military genius was consistently undermined by Count Dooku's interference. Throughout numerous campaigns, Grievous found his strategic initiatives sabotaged by contradictory orders from above. When he had successfully cornered Republic forces and victory seemed assured, Dooku would often command him to withdraw, citing nebulous greater strategic considerations. These interventions weren't random acts of micromanagement. They formed part of a calculated pattern designed to maintain the war's delicate balance. Grievous grew increasingly frustrated with these constraints as the war progressed. His military experience and tactical acumen often conflicted with the seemingly illogical directives he received. During several key campaigns, he was prevented from pursuing aggressive attacks against vulnerable Republic positions, forced instead to follow strategies that appeared designed to prolong the conflict rather than win it decisively. The relationship between Grievous and Dooku was particularly fascinating in its complexity. While Dooku had saved Grievous's life through cybernetic reconstruction and trained him in lightsaber combat, their training sessions often devolved into exercises in humiliation. Dooku would regularly demonstrate his superiority, using force powers that Grievous could never possess to remind him of his limitations. Yet the Count was careful to maintain Grievous's loyalty through calculated praise and the promise of eventual revenge against the Jedi. Perhaps most telling was Grievous's growing awareness of Darth Sidious's shadow presence. Though he rarely interacted directly with the mysterious Sith Lord, Grievous began noticing discrepancies between the Separatists' stated goals and their actual military operations. Many campaigns seemed to serve no purpose except to spread terror and chaos, with strategic objectives that appeared to conflict with the Separatists' public aims. As the war progressed, Grievous's suspicions about his role intensified. He began taking measures to protect his autonomy within the constraints of his position. Though his dependence on Separatist maintenance for his cybernetic systems limited his options. His tactical decisions began showing signs of attempting to assert independence while still maintaining the appearance of loyalty to the Separatist cause. The Battle of Coruscant would prove to be the culmination of these suspicions. The massive assault on the Republic capital appeared to be a bold military strike, but the specific parameters of Grievous's mission made little strategic sense. He was ordered to kidnap Chancellor Palpatine while simultaneously leading an attack that seemed deliberately designed to fail in its broader objectives. The operation appeared orchestrated to test certain Republic responses rather than achieve traditional military goals. What makes Grievous's position truly tragic was his inability to break free from this manipulation, despite his growing awareness of it. His cybernetic enhancements, while giving him tremendous physical capabilities, required regular maintenance and specialized parts that only the Separatists could provide. The Sith had essentially created a leash of dependency, ensuring that even if Grievous fully understood his role as a pawn, he could never truly rebel against his masters. The extent of this control became evident in the final months of the war. Grievous's behavior showed increasing signs of frustration and barely contained rage, yet his actions remained confined within the parameters set by his Sith masters. Even his tactical decisions began showing signs of this internal conflict, aggressive enough to maintain his fearsome reputation, yet never quite effective enough to achieve the decisive victories he was capable of planning. In a cruel twist of fate, the very pursuit of power that had led Grievous to accept Dooku's initial offer had become the instrument of his enslavement. The more authority he appeared to gain within the Separatist hierarchy, the more tightly bound he became to the Sith's grand design. His position as Supreme Commander of the Droid armies, while impressive on the surface, served primarily to bind him more closely to the very masters who manipulated him. Throughout the war, Grievous found himself caught between his military instincts and the often contradictory demands of his superiors. His attempts to wage war effectively were repeatedly undermined by orders that seemed designed to maintain a strategic stalemate rather than achieve victory. The Sith's control over his cybernetic maintenance meant that even when he recognized these contradictions, he had no choice but to comply. The psychological toll of this manipulation became increasingly evident in Grievous's behavior during military operations. While he maintained his fearsome reputation and tactical brilliance, there were signs of growing internal conflict. His aggressive pursuit of military objectives would often be followed by reluctant withdrawals ordered by Dooku, creating a pattern of frustrated initiatives that served the Sith's larger plans. In the final analysis, Grievous's story serves as a stark reminder of the Sith's mastery of manipulation. They had transformed a proud warrior into a powerful but ultimately controlled weapon, using his own ambitions and need for revenge to bind him to their cause. His position of apparent authority masked a deeper truth, that he was simply another piece in the Sith's grand game, a fearsome but ultimately expendable tool in their plot to destroy the Republic and the Jedi Order. The tragedy of Grievous's position lay in how completely the Sith had trapped him through his own desires. His quest for power and vengeance had led him into a cage from which his considerable abilities could not free him. Even as he began to recognize his role as a pawn, his physical dependence on Separatist technology ensured his continued compliance with the very masters who manipulated him. The harsh winds of Utapau's sinkholes carried an unmistakable tension as General Grievous's landing craft descended into the depths of Pau City. The 10th level's landing platform, chosen specifically for its defensible position, would soon become the stage for one of the Clone Wars' most dramatic confrontations. Grievous arrived with his elite Magna Guard escorts, their electrostaffs casting purple reflections across the weathered stone walls. Pau City's unique architecture, a vertical metropolis carved into massive sinkholes, provided Grievous with what he believed to be the perfect fortress. The Separatist presence had already been established through carefully orchestrated negotiations with Port Administrator Tion Medon, though these were conducted under significant duress. Grievous had positioned his vast droid army throughout the various levels of the city, creating concentric rings of defense that would make any Republic assault costly. The general's tactical setup demonstrated his military expertise. B-1 battle droids were stationed at regular intervals along the upper levels, serving as both sentries and early warning systems. The more capable B-2 super battle droids were concentrated around key defensive positions, while squadrons of deadly tri-fighters patrolled the sinkhole's massive circumference. Grievous had essentially transformed the entire city into a massive kill box. What Grievous couldn't have anticipated was that his location would be revealed by the very beings he had tried to intimidate. Port Administrator Medon's crucial intelligence reached the Jedi Council, leading to Obi-Wan Kenobi's arrival aboard his faithful Varactyl mount, Boga. The initial confrontation would become one of the most studied moments of the Clone Wars. "Hello there!" Kenobi's famous greeting, delivered with characteristic swagger, marked the beginning of what would become Grievous's final battle. The general's response was equally memorable, ordering his Magna Guards to stand down with a dismissive wave. "You fool! I've been trained in your Jedi arts by Count Dooku himself. These would be among the last words many would hear from the Supreme Commander of the droid armies." What followed was a display of combat prowess that demonstrated why Grievous had become so feared throughout the galaxy. The general advanced on Kenobi, his mechanical arms splitting apart to reveal 4 separate limbs, each wielding a lightsaber taken from a fallen Jedi. The trophies of his previous victories now became weapons in what he hoped would be his greatest triumph. The duel itself was a masterclass in both Jedi and Separatist combat techniques. Grievous's modified Form 4 fighting style, augmented by his cybernetic enhancements, allowed him to create a literal wall of plasma blades, his arms becoming a whirling vortex of death. Kenobi, forced onto the defensive, relied heavily on his mastery of Sorisu, the third form of lightsaber combat. Grievous's attack pattern showed evidence of careful study of Kenobi's previous battles, specifically targeting known weaknesses in Sorisu's defensive sequences. But Kenobi's experience proved decisive in the early stages of the fight. Using precise blade work, he managed to sever one of Grievous's mechanical hands, reducing the cyborg's overwhelming offense. This prompted Grievous to adapt his strategy, incorporating more aggressive climbing maneuvers that took advantage of his mechanical physiology. The battle moved vertically through Pao City's infrastructure, with both combatants demonstrating remarkable acrobatic ability. The fighting reached its crescendo on a hidden landing platform where Grievous's personal fighter was docked. Here, the general's combat style became increasingly desperate and unpredictable. He abandoned traditional lightsaber forms entirely, relying instead on his superior strength and ability to traverse terrain impossible for organic beings. He began using his mechanical legs as weapons, demonstrating previously unseen combat adaptations. The duel remained evenly matched through several exchanges, with neither warrior able to gain a decisive advantage. Grievous's unorthodox attacks repeatedly tested Kenobi's defenses, while the Jedi Master's precise technique frustrated the general's attempts to overwhelm him. Their combat moved across various platforms and levels, each trying to use the environment to their advantage. The battle's final moments showcased both the greatest strength and fatal flaw in Grievous's cybernetic enhancement. His reinforced chassis, capable of withstanding direct lightsaber strikes, proved vulnerable to more primitive forms of damage. Kenobi, drawing on his battlefield improvisation skills, managed to pry open the protective plates covering Grievous's vital organic components. This exposed the general's few remaining biological parts, a decision made years ago by Grievous himself to maintain his tactical thinking and warrior spirit. The final blow came not from a lightsaber, but from a more uncivilized weapon, Kenobi's appropriated blaster. Several precise shots to Grievous's exposed organic heart ended the life of one of the galaxy's most feared military commanders. The cybernetic shell that had made him nearly invincible became his final tomb, as the damage to his organic components proved fatal. The Battle of Utapau marked the end of General Grievous's reign of terror over the galaxy. His final duel demonstrated both his incredible capabilities and ultimate limitations. Despite his cybernetic enhancements, tactical brilliance, and fearsome reputation, he was ultimately undone by the vulnerability of his remaining organic components. A poetic end for a being caught between the mechanical and the organic, between his warrior past and cybernetic present. In the decades following the Clone Wars, General Grievous's legacy would echo through the galaxy in profound and unexpected ways. Like ripples in a disturbed pool, his influence spread far beyond his military campaigns, touching everything from technological development to cultural memory, leaving an indelible mark on a galaxy forever changed by war. The extent of Grievous's campaign against the Jedi had a devastating impact on the Order. His systematic hunting of Force users, combined with his Force's operations, significantly weakened the Jedi ranks before Order 66. His effectiveness in killing Jedi proved that even those strong with the Force could be overcome by superior tactics and technology, shattering the aura of invincibility that had long surrounded the Order. The psychological impact of his campaign persisted long after his death. Surviving Jedi during the Dark Times reported that the specter of Grievous haunted their memories, not just as a personal threat, but as a symbol of how vulnerable they had become. His success in hunting Jedi became a grim reminder that their connection to the Force didn't guarantee survival in a galaxy turning against them. Militarily, Grievous's influence resonated through the emerging Imperial war machine. His innovations in coordinating massive droid armies provided valuable lessons in large-scale military operations. The precision timing of multiple attack groups, the use of overwhelming force at critical points, and the psychology of terror as a weapon, all these elements found their way into Imperial strategic thinking, though the Empire was careful never to publicly acknowledge this debt to a separatist commander. The study of Grievous's campaigns offered valuable insights into both effective tactics and fatal flaws in military leadership. His successes demonstrated the value of unpredictability and psychological warfare, while his failures highlighted how personal vendetta and pride could undermine otherwise sound strategy. Military academies across the galaxy would analyze his battles, learning both what to emulate and what to avoid. In the realm of technology, Grievous's cybernetic enhancement program helped advance the field of human-machine integration. While the exact details of his transformation remained classified, the general principles learned from his case contributed to developments in prosthetic technology and cyborg enhancement. The successful fusion of organic decision-making with mechanical precision in his design influenced future research in cybernetic augmentation. The controversy surrounding his reconstruction also sparked important debates about the ethics of cybernetic enhancement. His case raised crucial questions about the balance between maintaining human consciousness and pushing the boundaries of mechanical augmentation. These discussions would become increasingly relevant as cybernetic technology advanced in the following decades. His impact on cultural memory varied dramatically across the galaxy. On worlds that had experienced his campaigns firsthand, Grievous became a figure of terror in local mythology, his story serving as a warning about the horrors of war. In separatist-aligned systems, alternative narratives emerged, portraying him as a tragic hero who fought against Republic oppression. On his homeworld of Kaylee, Grievous's legacy was particularly complex. His story became interwoven with traditional Kaleesh warrior legends, serving as both a source of pride and a cautionary tale. He was remembered as a great warrior who fought for his people, but also as one whose pursuit of power led him down a path of transformation and ultimately destruction. The academic study of Grievous's life underwent several revisions as new information came to light. Early historical accounts painted him simply as a brutal enforcer of separatist will. However, as scholars gained access to more records and began to understand the manipulation he had endured, a more nuanced picture emerged of a talented military leader caught in the machinations of powers beyond his control. Grievous's impact on military architecture and defensive planning was significant. His effectiveness at penetrating supposedly secure facilities led to widespread revisions in military installation design. The methods he used to infiltrate and capture key strategic positions influenced the development of both defensive fortifications and assault strategies in the following decades. In the underworld, Grievous's tactics were studied and adapted by various criminal organizations. His methods of intimidation and strategic deployment of forces influenced how some criminal empires conducted their operations, though few could match his military genius or technological advantages. The broader historical significance of Grievous's role in the Clone Wars became clearer with time. His position as Supreme Commander of the Droid armies placed him at the heart of a conflict engineered by the Sith, though he never fully understood his part in their grand design. His story became emblematic of how the Sith manipulated powerful individuals and organizations to achieve their goals. Perhaps most significantly, Grievous's legacy served as a reminder of the Clone Wars' transformative impact on the galaxy. His own transformation from organic warrior to cybernetic commander paralleled the larger militarization of the Republic and its eventual evolution into the Empire. The story of how a proud Kaleesh warrior became a fearsome cyborg general came to represent the larger tragedy of how the galaxy's protective institutions became instruments of oppression. The full extent of Grievous's influence on Imperial military doctrine remains a subject of historical debate. While official Imperial records downplayed any connection to separatist strategies, military historians have noted striking similarities between some of Grievous's innovative tactics and later Imperial operations. His approach to overwhelming force, psychological warfare, and the coordination of massive military assets found echoes in Imperial strategic planning. In the area of cybernetic development, Grievous's case provided valuable data about the possibilities and limitations of extensive cybernetic enhancement. While the extreme nature of his transformation was never replicated, the principles learned from his reconstruction influenced the development of more practical and ethical cybernetic applications. His example served as both a breakthrough and a warning in the field of cybernetic research. Ultimately, General Grievous's legacy transcended his role as a military commander, becoming instead a powerful symbol of transformation and manipulation in a galaxy undergoing massive change. His story continues to resonate because it embodies universal themes: the price of power, the nature of identity, and the question of how much of one's humanity can be sacrificed before it is irretrievably lost. In the end, he remains one of the most fascinating and complex figures of his era, his legacy as multifaceted as the war that defined him.